Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into something completely fascinating today, the unseen structures that basically govern our realities. And by that, I mean both the physical world we walk through and the digital spaces we swipe through every single day. We're going to unpack the actual architecture of power. You know, George Lucas once said, "Democracies aren't overthrown, they're given away." And man, those words perfectly capture the fragility of freedom. We usually picture empires being forged in these sudden, violent conquests, right? But history, and actually some of our most famous pop culture, tells us a much quieter and, honestly, a far more chilling story. Okay, let's dive into this because it is a total mystery when you first hear it. What on earth do Star Wars, former US President Richard Nixon, and the billionaires of modern Silicon Valley actually have in common? I know it sounds like the setup to a bizarre joke, but I promise you, the answer reveals exactly how systems of absolute control are built literally right under our noses. So here's our roadmap for today. We're covering 1. How democracies are given away. 2. Echoes of Rome and Nixon. 3. The state of exception. 4. The Silicon Valley mythos. And 5. The architecture of control. Let's get into it. Starting off with Section 1. How democracies are given away. Focusing on the fall of the Republic. You see, thoughtful science fiction isn't just about cool spaceships. It almost always acts as a mirror to our own real-world political realities. George Lucas famously used the whole Star Wars saga to process his deep anxieties about the political climate of his own time. Because he didn't just pull this stuff out of thin air. Lucas explicitly designed his cinematic factions around real history. The Rebel Alliance, modeled directly after the Viet Cong and the American Revolutionaries, essentially the little guys in coonskin caps going up against a behemoth. The Galactic Empire, on the flip side, was heavily inspired by the Nixon-era United States during the Vietnam War, along with the British Empire and Nazi Germany. And Lucas noted a brilliant historical irony here. Despite having overwhelming resources, these highly technical, massive empires historically end up losing to the so-called little guys. Which transitions us perfectly to Section 2, Echoes of Rome and Nixon, looking at the historical parallels. The reason Lucas's narrative hits us so hard is that it draws on the cyclical nature of history. He's actively warning us about political vulnerabilities that have been around for thousands of years. And this brilliantly illustrates that cycle. Look at the timeline. In 44 BC, Julius Caesar is named dictator in perpetuity, basically hollowing out the Roman Republic from the inside while keeping its vocabulary intact. Fast forward to the 1930s, and we see fascist dictators rising through seemingly legal enabling acts. Then the 1970s, Nixon's presidency in Vietnam sparked huge fears of executive overreach. And finally, from 1999 to 2005, Lucas releases the Star Wars prequels to show exactly how a democratic galactic republic could mirror these exact historical anxieties, voluntarily voting away its own freedom. That takes us straight into Section 3, the state of exception and manufacturing crisis. Because this is the exact specific mechanism corrupt leaders use to legally seize absolute power. It's not about breaking the law. Actually, scratch that. It's about bending the legal structure itself, so breaking the law isn't even necessary. This is what legal scholars call the state of exception. It is the legal suspension of the existing legal order and your rights during a crisis. It gives a political leader's decree the literal force of law. In Star Wars, Chancellor Palpatine didn't conquer the galaxy by brute force. He generated a massive, confusing crisis, the Clone Wars, so the Senate would eagerly hand him emergency powers in the name of security. Like the character Padme famously notes, "Liberty dies to thunderous applause." Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how academic analysis takes this even further. This excerpt from the Australian Feminist Law Journal points out how the force itself operates kind of like the law. It's omnipresent, sure, but totally malleable. The rule of law itself just isn't enough to protect us from evil, because an existing legal order can very willingly be co-opted to agree to terrible things, all under the guise of restoring order and peace. The emergency itself is the distraction. All right, let's pivot to Section 4, the Silicon Valley mythos and modern-day tech feudalism. We spent time on the political empires of the past, but what about the brand new technological empires being built right now? Because the battleground has absolutely shifted from the Senate floor to the server farm. In the source material, we're seeing this fierce, real-time ideological clash between two fascinating figures. On one side, we have Damian Walter, a sci-fi critic warning of a global surveillance state driven by transhumanist elites. On the other side, Kyle McLean Smith, a systems architect warning of foreign systemic capture of national sovereignty, and he's advocating for decentralized, auditable code. As impartial observers, it is just incredible to watch. They violently disagree on the exact nature of the threat and how to fight it, but both are sounding a massive alarm about invisible systems of power being built right this second. Let's break down Walter's specific claims for a moment. He argues that tech billionaires are completely captured by the ideology of transhumanism, which is the desire to use science to escape biological mortality altogether. To pull this off, he claims they are building a dystopian tech feudalism. So, while the rest of us are pacified by digital soma, those endless streams of content and storytelling we all scroll through, a massive global surveillance architecture is being quietly constructed all around us. And this brings us to what the sources call the Palantir paradox. Take billionaire Peter Thiel, for example. He openly professes a fear of a totalitarian global antichrist state. Yet, in completely contradictory action, he actively funds Palantir. This is a multi-billion-dollar data analytics company that provides the exact global surveillance architecture a totalitarian state would need. It's the wild irony of fearing the machine while actively, and very lucratively, building its most powerful tools. Which leads us right into Section 5, the architecture of control, specifically peripheral manipulation. How do populations give up this control without even realizing it's happening? Well, the source material offers a mind-blowing biological parallel to explain this. So the crucial point is this biological parallel. Researchers at Penn State studied the Ophiocordyceps fungus. You might know it as the famous zombie ant fungus. They found that it controls its host not by invading the brain, but by surrounding and manipulating the muscle fibers peripherally. It forms a 3D network that works literally like a puppeteer pulling the strings of a marionette. The ant's core sovereignty, its actual brain, is completely bypassed by a peripheral network that forces it to do the fungus's bidding. Let's move to and see how this builds a metaphor for our digital lives today. Just like that fungus bypassing the brain to control the muscles, Walter warns of gamified, tech-driven systems manipulating society peripherally. Step 1 is the imposition of an authoritarian order disguised as convenience. Step 2, AI regulating human behavior and work output. Step 3, the real-world manifestation of social credit systems. Your internal freedom of thought remains totally intact, but your peripheral ability to move through society, to buy, sell, travel, or speak online is entirely controlled by the network. We've covered Roman dictators, galactic empires, zombie fungi, and modern tech billionaires. And it all leaves us with this final, absolutely vital question. Which is the greater threat to our sovereignty? The political empires of the past, seizing power through engineered crises, or the technological architectures of our future, quietly wrapping around our society like a peripheral network? The code is being written right now. We definitely need to pay attention to who is holding the pen. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I hope this sparked your curiosity to look just a little closer at the systems around you.